Hi, this is David Gornoski, host of A Neighbor's Choice and Things Hidden podcast, as well as some of our other programs like Science and You with our chief science advisor, Dr. Yu, and our seed oil survival series that we continue to have great fun unpacking the truth of nutrition. I wanted to give you a quick little message saying we appreciate all the support that we get from our monthly contributors and our one-time donation supporters, and we'd encourage all of you to go to our website, aneighborschoice.com, click on contribute, and make a monthly pledge today, whether it's $1, $5, $15, $20, $50, whatever you want to do. Doesn't matter. Just be a part of building this new media project that we've developed to empower and inform, to inspire, to kickstart a scientific renaissance, an anthropological breakthrough and reformation in the church. All these things are possible with your support right now. So make that commitment today and help us keep doing the productions that we have. Thank you. I'm David Gornoski, back for another Things Hidden podcast where we're going to look at anthropology and current events mixed together, like iron and clay mixed together. Joining me is Surit Dasgupta, a writer, editor at aneighborschoice.com. How you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing good. So we're going to dive into, as promised on social media today, I said I was going to get into some more original contributions to the world of anthropology and in some sense theology, using the toolkit that Rene Girard pioneered with mimetic theory and the scapegoat mechanism theory. But unlike a lot of folks who, and people keep saying name names, look, that would be mimetic, to draw people into mimetic rivalry. But I just want to let my audience know, folks who come to this podcast are familiar with Rene Girard and mimetic theory, typically. And you may see, and I'm not trying to diss, but I'm trying to give you true, straightforward, straight talk and not be, afraid, I don't want to make anybody upset. But there's a lot of folks who are going to continually try to grift off of the cool energy surrounding mimetic theory. Peter Thiel's a high status guy for a lot of people that want to have businesses and startups and tech bros and people online trying to become stars and stuff. And they're mesmerized by folks like Peter Thiel and so forth and so on. And Rene Girard has become an intellectual fad on some circles like seed oils and so forth. And it's important when we get into this topic to not coast and just be excited about citing chapter and verse of the great master's writings and never going forward and never pushing the ball forward. And so we do that on this show. We push the ball forward. We move and we bring original thought and original analysis that you don't see anywhere else to topics both current and timeless, like a biblical passage like we're going to do today. So I just want to say that just to let you know that don't let folks who are chasing social status and self-help guru status, don't let them shortchange the importance of the biblical anthropology that Rene Girard touched on. Because the emphasis should be the biblical anthropology, not the gimmicks that you can get with understanding how human nature works with mimetic theory. That's the easy, low-hanging fruit. It's much harder to stand like a rock on the rock that is Jesus, the cornerstone, and really dive deep into texts with courage and confidence, because you're not going to find any, unfortunately, Christian tradition that really has been well equipped with anthropology, in my opinion. I'll just say that. And so when you're out here excavating anthropological gold mine like we do, digging in the text and digging into current events and making it all make sense, you're in a scary spot. You're in a frontier spot. You're landing on the moon, you're landing on Mars or something, and there's not a lot. I mean, you can pull from inspiration, but there's not going to be a lot of support from any religious tradition or denomination to kind of piggyback off of or imitate. You're going to have kind of have the courage to imitate the true greats and go forward without reference. Do you find that to be the case, Surit, as you write about anthropology in your work?
Yeah, I mean, like, it is a very safe way we can read Rene Girard without, really, without it not really having any impact, and just, kind of having it as this thing, this toy that you can play with. Uh, then there's the way that we have been trying to do, is to really use Girard as a toolkit, as a code breaking kind of machine, which, deciphers everything that we see all around us. And which, this is what really Girard intended his theory to be, right? He intended his theory to be a unifying theory of sociology, right? Where you can literally unpack anything that you see with what he has uh, written about in his mimetic theory and all of that. So yeah.
Now, having said that, we're about to dive into a text that unfortunately is something that I have typically, not this particular text, but just some of those prophetic texts of the Old Testament, I have typically shied away from diving into on the program that deal with future prophecies, because there's so much scammy gimmicks online, particularly about, interpreting these prophecies in ways that are, this means Great Britain. No, this means Russia. No, this means, America. No, this means the Catholic Church. Everybody has got their little gimmick spin on it. And it muddies, right? It muddies the discourse around those texts, because it becomes inscrutable. It's just about whatever your bias is. If you're team A, then the villain symbol is going to be your biggest enemy, rival. And then if you're team B religiously, then your rival is going to be your thing. And it's like, it doesn't really connect with actual real life. But today we're going to attempt in real time to look at a text that's famous and iconic in biblical eschatology, which is the study of future things. And we're going to look and see if a things hidden mimetic anthropological analysis can make more understanding available to us that can help us in our time. So we're going to do this in real time, and bear with us as we go through this. But I think it might be helpful for us all to try this and to do this more often. We've done it in other texts, but this one's going to be a little bit trickier because, again, it's symbolic, prophetic text, and there's a lot of emotional charged stuff around this stuff. Because when you start going into these texts, like I said, everybody has their camp and everybody has their favorite little villain that they've assigned the symbolic meaning to, and they don't want to step outside of that comfort zone, as you've probably noticed in your experience, right?
Yes, exactly. So nobody wants everybody has their own tradition, right? And nobody wants their tradition to be, not taking the center stage in their worldview. And when you offer something that's not necessarily contradicting the tradition that you have, but instead, really presenting something which is much more beautiful, much more, appealing, and much more informative, and a lot more explicative, when you put forward that kind of information, people really find themselves on the defensive because it sorts of threatens their bubble, their comfort, in their worldview. So people don't like, in short, people don't like being challenged. And I think like this has been one of the most, unfortunately, one of the biggest headaches in Christian in among church folk, is that people don't like to have their paradigm shifted, so
So
yeah.
let's see if this will help people understand. And this is going to be David Lynch style because we're dealing with dreams. This is Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. He was in the Black Lodge, so to speak. So the
Yeah, and
king,
why was, I think like before you progress, it's I think it's very important to consider who's having this dream. It's not just any normal person who's having this dream. It's a ruler of a nation. It's a ruler. It's the king who is having the dream, and this king is troubled by the dream. But I wonder what makes a ruler get, so disturbed, right?
yeah. Um, and it says, so the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers. That's a motley crew if you've ever seen them. Magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king, may the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. So here we have a nice, well-oiled, so to speak, pagan, ancient empire, right? Babylon. And he brings in these people who are very familiar with, rights and taboos and differentiation versus undifferentiation, very familiar with hierarchy, very familiar with sacrifice and violence. But he has a dream, the guy in charge of this whole operation. And as we understand, the king of these empires can also be a scapegoat when they fall down. But so that's why he's troubled, right? He had a dream and he hasn't told people what it is yet, but he's troubled about what it means, probably because he understands his role on a visceral level, that your king one day brought down as a sacrificial victim the next. And the astrologers answer saying, may the king live forever. So they're giving him his props. They're making sure that he understands that they recognize him as the external mediator, as above them. Tell your servants the dream and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces like ham here, okay? He wants to make these guys Christmas ham roasts out of these guys. And your house is turned into piles of rubble. So he's going to go genocidal on these guys. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Now, again, he's threatening ritual sacrifice, right? He's threatening to sacrifice these aristocrats in his court if they can't go ahead and tell him what the dream is before he's told them what it is. And if you want to jump in here anytime, just do so. But because I'm looking at the text, I won't see you if you're indicating with your interest to say anything. I won't see your eyes. But he says, so once more they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you are trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there's only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. The astrologers
So the
answered.
king,
Well, go ahead.
so the king is basically saying, I won't tell you the dream.
Yeah.
You'll have to straight away interpret
Yeah.
without. Man, that looks like a very awkward position to be in, right?
Yeah. Because he's trying to see, do they have real power or what? So he's probably had some history with these guys, getting it wrong. Rufus, you told me the frogs meant that I was going to have a lot of water this year, and we haven't had any water. When I had that big frog dream. So getting sick and tired of you, Rufus.
So you're telling me this king has received a lot of scam calls.
Yeah, he's had a lot of Miss Cleos. Call me now. And he's like, wait a second, I'm sick and tired of you guys taking my money, and I got to tell you my facts, and then you tell me some BS. Yeah, we can all really relate to Nebuchadnezzar here, right? We can all relate, and that's a good point. Thank you for bringing. So that's a good point. We can all relate to Nebuchadnezzar. We've all been around scam artists. It's called politicians, pundits, right? Philosophers, gurus on YouTube, all trying to tell you, stuff based on, data that's readily available, and they're just BSing it. So he's asking for something better than that. He wants to know, well, what did I actually dream? Can you tell me my dream? So they go on. So he goes on to say, the astrologers answered the king, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. When what the king asks is too difficult, no one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. That's interesting, because they're saying only a god could understand what you were dreaming before, or could tell you what your dream was before you shared it with us. But they're so far away, they don't hang out with humans. So there's a clue about incarnational Christianity right there, right? That God dwelt among us. He's going to dwell among us. He's going to be imminently with us. And but that's the theological part of it. The anthropological thing that we can look at the text here is that this is dealing with understanding the study of humankind. So now we know this is anthropology. There's a little bit of anthropology going on here, because they're saying, well, only a god could reveal that, but they don't live among humans, so you're out of luck, In other words, it would take both theology and anthropology. It would take a god and fully man to fully understand and unveil that which he wants unveiled, right? Which is going to help us understand this story. This made the king so furious, so angry, that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. So he was in the wizard camp, I guess, and they were going to kill him. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. So he was wise, right? He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Again, from an anthropological standpoint, the Old Testament is going to have prophetic traditions that are going to critique sacrifice, because the idea that such a decree would be considered harsh may not be considered harsh from a pagan text. If a pagan text was writing this story, they may not indicate that such a decree was harsh. But the biblical prophets are going to critique sacrificial logic with little questions and poking holes along the way of the story of mankind. Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery. so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. So he's taking on a role of anti-sacrifice, right? Don't need to sacrifice these people. I've been given, so my God is the God who defends scapegoats. My God is the God who defends the accused, even to the point of defending pagan sorcerers, right? Hey, don't kill the sorcerer, right? A lot of trad Christians might want to kill sorcerers, but Daniel, I guess, didn't get the memo thousands of years ago because he was trying to defend magicians and enchanters and sorcerers from Babylon and protect their life.
Yeah, the only one who kills the sorcerer is the pagan king.
Yeah,
not the follower of the god.
Yeah, not the follower of this of the hero of the story of the Bible. So Arioch took down to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means. The king asked Daniel, Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? Daniel replied, No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mystery showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive. So he's showing humility. He's not being a boaster. He's not trying to set him up with social status and clout chasing, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood as a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the king of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler over them all. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of Heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all of its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. So I really want to hone in on the prophecy part, the dream and interpretation. And a lot of folks in theological circles and interpreting this, they're fixated on trying to place, identify each empire. And I'm not going to negate any of those attempts. Maybe one of them is correct. So you've got the gold head, right? And they say that's Nebuchadnezzar, right? And then you've got the silver, arms of silver and so forth. And then they'll say, well, that's the Medo-Persian kingdom. And then you say you got the thighs of brass. That's the Alexander the Great, some say. And then you've got, the iron, legs of iron. That's Rome or whatever, right? And then you get all these different interpretations about these different levels. Again, I'm looking at another image right now. If you just type in Daniel chapter 2 or Nebuchadnezzar statue, you'll see all these different attempts to explain this. Babylonian Empire is gold, silver is the Medo-Persian Empire, bronze, Greek Empire, iron, Roman Empire. You look at other, and then they'll say end times at the last one, right? And some of them have different, they'll put the Roman Empire there, here, they have different spins on it. But I think trying to identify who is, again, a kind of disembodied approach to understanding the text. And as the text itself revealed, Surit, we're not dealing with a God who is in the sky. In order to understand this dream, we have to have a God who's amongst people, right? A God who's an anthropology, who's going to reveal anthropology in the text that this God, divinely inspires, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also, we have to look at the actions, right? Why is okay, it's good knowing what the symbols stand for and all of that, but if you don't know the actions within the symbolic dream, then you just be knowing the geography. You won't be knowing the dynamic within the kingdoms of the world and all of that. So I think we can, the thing that gets left out when we listen to all the mainstream interpretation and the hermeneutics and all of that is the rock striking the feet part. That's where it really gets very interesting, and I think that's going to be the focus of what's the what certainly we would consider the most relevant part of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah, and there's again, people try to use biblical text as a kind of like a predictor, like an astrology book or something, trying to, understand, like a cheat code to understanding the times and the end times and all this. And I think, again, that appeals to people's tribal needs, and they want to feel like they can use something as like a talisman. But I think the anthropology of here is much, much more clearly like understood than trying to use it as a predictor, like a decoder ring or something. Because it's, if you understand the whole flow of the biblical story, it's defending the victim, it's defending the scapegoat, defending the marginalized outcast. It's no wonder that it's a bunch of exiles that provide the dream and the correct interpretation. It's those on the outside, the marginalized ones, that are going to give us a glimpse at where God is moving history to restore, as James said, true religion is to defend the widow and the orphan, which are the symbolic icons of marginalized living, right? If you're a widow and an orphan,
Right.
you're
Right.
in the worst status of society traditionally throughout history, right?
Right. And if we look just momentarily at verse 21, when Daniel praises the God of heaven after God reveals the dream and the mystery behind the dream. Yeah, in verse 21, Daniel praises, he sings basically that God changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. So this is like, okay, like if a modern day Christian is looking at this passage, oh, really, like that Christian or even a normal person would say, like, what's so special about saying God deposes kings and raises up others, right? But this is really radical and really borderline dangerous to say this in times of the ancient in the ancient world, because if you haven't noticed, if you haven't read during the throughout the Old Testament, and if you haven't noticed that the kings often raised up their own images as idols and commanded that their subjects bow down and worship those idols, those images representatives of the king. In short, the king, even up until the time of Jesus, the kings, the Caesars, they all considered themselves divine, and they considered themselves gods, and they commanded the subjects to worship them on fear of death, on the threat of death, right? Like if people did not worship their kings as gods, they would be killed, they would be sacrificed. So here instantly, like, we can see the glimpses of how God, how the revelation of the God that protects the marginalized and the downtrodden, the God who defends the scapegoat, is deconstructing here the the that, and saying to the people in the ancient world that the emperor has no clothes, right?
Yeah.
The emperor is a mere mortal, and the emperor is subject to me, who is the true
Yeah.
God.
So it's this is like an apocalyptic inbreaking of unveiling the mechanisms of kingly power and empires in a way that safely is it's an attempt to protect lives, right? Daniel's trying to save his life and those of his fellow wise men and astrologers.
Right.
And so in the defense of victims, we get a revelation of the mechanisms of scapegoat violence, as Things Hidden podcast is all about. I mean, the text, he even says that thing where he says his prayer, he praises heaven, saying he reveals deep and hidden things. That reminds me of what Jesus said, I have come to reveal things hidden since the foundation of the world. And the world being the cosmic order, the world being the social order, right? So in the social order of things, when we get to Daniel's time, that's the golden age. That's the age in which
Yeah.
the scapegoat mechanism is still working very well in a way that isn't seen as ugly or harsh, although Daniel does indicate that there's some prophetic taint starting to penetrate even there, but it's still relative to where we are today, the golden age of sacrificial logic. I mean, that's why he's willing to just murder people and their whole families without even a second thought, because
Right.
they won't give him his dream before he's told them. So, I mean, that shows you that the golden age of sacrificial logic is the era in which you can't see the ugliness of the sausage making of politics and empire in this era yet. It's still pretty much enclosed with mimetic unanimity around the structures. And this isn't just Babylon. This represents, I mean, we can't forget that there are human beings in Aztec, empire and others. I don't know the time scale exactly here, but there's other nations and going on around the world at the time Babylon's existing. And they're going through the same sausage making of scapegoat violence that they don't recognize as unjust pillaging of victims. They don't recognize the human person as a dignified image of God. They don't recognize these things the way we now take for granted them in our modern culture. So when you get to the silver stage, it's a little bit not as pretty, it's a little bit not as pretty. So again, I'm not going to get into which empire is which. These interpretations may be correct, but I'm going to give you, and hopefully in this, the understanding of why there's a gradation going on. Why is there going from gold to lesser quality, and then this weird thing at the end? That's what we're trying to show from an anthropological standpoint. And then you can fit your empire favorites onto wherever you want. That's the fun little, playtime stuff for people to, try to
the favorite,
pick the news,
least you can place your least favorite groups, least favorite empires in that, and just
exactly.
satisfy.
But the point is that you got, in case you get to the next, so we obviously recognize, and I recognize that this is a prophecy, this is a vision of things hidden about the future, about history, and we're now some period of time away from that period, so we can see that the next era, silver, is not quite as pretty, not quite as shiny, not quite as smooth sailing. That comes to replace Babylon, and then we get the belly and thighs of bronze. Again, bronze is representative of kind of third place to this day. It's gold, silver, and bronze at the Olympics. It's not so good. Then you get down to legs of iron. It's feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. So this clay thing, I see this as a symbol of humans. Clay is from the dust of the earth. We're made as jars of clay, the Bible says. And he's the potter, we are the clay. These different metaphors you see. Clay is dust, and it's how you make pottery. But clay is a symbol for humanity. So when you get to iron, now here's it, iron is not as beautiful as gold and silver, but it's pure power, right? So whatever empire anthropologically is mixed of iron and clay is an empire in which the power doesn't look as pretty anymore. The violence, the murders, the corruption, the wars, the killings, the assassinations, they're not having the same golden sheen anymore. They don't even look silver. They don't even look bronze. It's just pure iron. Iron is something that you don't hold up and gaze at with wonder and, oh, it's so beautiful. You look at it like that's work. That's grinding us down, right?
That'll do. Yeah, that will work. Yeah,
that'll get the job done. That hurts. That's painful. Iron, boom, the iron boot, bam. So
like IKEA furniture.
Yeah, and then you've got clay, which is this symbol of like humanness. It's brittle, it's weak, and it's mixed in with iron. This is a result of Jesus coming into history and breaking open the sausage making of politics in the state, the sausage making of power and culture. He's revealing through his passion the vanity, the lie of sacrificially murdering one group of people for the collective's anger and wrath to be poured onto. And he's saying that gods actually don't demand this. Gods don't demand this type of exclusion. It's actually just crowds. That's why the gospel writers report it's angry, jealous crowds, not God, that demands Jesus' blood. It's an angry, jealous crowd that 2,000 years later, Christians still, I didn't hear you. What? It's God that no, we said it was a crowd. Go read all four gospels. It's a crowd that wanted Jesus' blood. No, they still, I think that was a God that wanted it. No, it was actually a crowd. We're still working on that. It was a crowd that demanded his blood. And therefore, ever since that, now the highest social ordering good is not left up to the world of the gods, but rather we have to work out our salvation with the Holy Spirit in coming into our human relations and in quickening us to be more gracious, loving, forgiving, nonviolent than those before us, as best as we can with humility, always leavening everything. But here's why it's iron and clay mixed together means brute power mixed with humanity, concern for humans. So in other words, whatever empire this is describing is a Christ-haunted society, something that we talk about all the time.
Yeah, I mean the iron is the empire part, right? The iron is the part of humanity that uses coercive violence to subjugate its own people and to make war on the outgroup, right? That's the iron, and the clay is the human part, right? Because I think it's in Isaiah chapter 64:8 where the prophet says, "But now, O Lord, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you our potter." So the clay in Bible typology is typically used to symbolize human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And iron is here, it's definitely referring to an empire, because Daniel himself is saying here that these are the all of these elements are representing empires throughout history, right? And the rock is not Dwayne Johnson, but rock in the Bible is representing Jesus, right? That's is representing the the one thing that will strike at the feet, which is the empire in its most vulnerable stage in the history of the world.
Right. And why
It's
is it the most vulnerable? Because it's Christ infected at that point. So
Yes,
what needs to be reemphasized to the audience is that the reason why there's a mixture of an unpretty workhorse power mixed with clay, the clay part is their attempt to justify their violence in the name of victims. That's so important. You got to understand that, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, this is powerful.
yeah, that's why it's a
Share this,
mixture,
study
right?
this, and understand this,
Yeah.
because this is how you understand the moment we're in. What was that, sir?
No, I was saying that's why it's a mixture. It's not just iron. It's a mixture of iron and clay.
Yeah, there's no
So it's a
other. What other explanation makes sense for this mixture here? What other metaphor are we getting at here? I mean, I look up 2 Corinthians 4:7, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but not crushed, perplexed, but not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. This is the language of nonviolent self-emptying, and you get clay again. So like you said, clay is a reference all throughout Scripture of humans. And so what kind of an empire is a mixture of iron with clay? It is a victimist empire, a politically correct
Yes.
empire, a global empire that wants to use the concern for victims to justify authoritarian violence. Exactly what we see all around us today. Now, I'm not trying to identify. This is where all the stupid part of of human beings is that we want to identify who's the villain here. It's America, right? No, it's this team. It's Roman Catholic Church. It's, they all want to pick a team. I don't care. You pick whichever locus of it. The point is the whole world is being brought under the dominion of an empire that wants to have uh, and has to a large extent a lot of global control over the whole world, uh, with the use of feminism. Well, we're defending women. That's why we don't want you to have children. We want you to scrub toilets in some IBM corporate headquarters or something.
That's why the Taliban are so bad in Afghanistan, right? They don't allow their women to go into universities and stuff, and study gender.
Yeah, that's what the myth of that. Yeah, they're saying that's the myth of the empire selling us as to why we have to go spend 20 something years and trillions of dollars and thousands of lives. Yeah, you're right. The mythic empire is because we have to give women the right to read over there or something. So that's the clay. The clay is, yeah, we all want a woman to read. That's fine. Right? But the point is to mix that with the iron of dropping bombs, Moab bombs, unleashing opium for CIA thugs to sell around the world, and all their little buddies and all their little intel groups to sell in the opium fields of Afghanistan to fund this stuff, letting people guard, as American soldiers were told to guard the homes of people doing, child molestation in a ritual practice, and Marines had to guard their homes to protect them from their past victims trying to get revenge on them. That is iron mixed with clay, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, trying to bomb people into becoming more enlightened, egalitarian, Rousseauian Democrats is iron mixed with clay. It's iron mixed with clay, and it's in Vietnam. It's there on all these. Progressively, it's getting more and more clay, and the more clay there is, the more it's brittle. Right? We got to understand that the clay makes it brittle. The clay makes it weak. The clay makes it not effective. Right? Because, and here's what I want to get to: this impotence of sacrifice concept. I've said this before. The level of brutality that would be needed to exercise dominion over a place like Afghanistan, where you literally have to crucify people alive to get them to stop doing some of their barbaric practices in their culture, is a level of brutality that our culture would never stomach. We would never tolerate it if it was publicly sanctioned. It might happen in the shadows here and there, Abu Ghraib, but it's never publicly sanctioned as this is the method that we employ to get people to obey us. That is the clay making the feet and the toes and all that brittle, because the iron can't hold its strength. It can't create stability. It can't create order and catharsis, because it can't create a unanimous consensus around who to scapegoat and who to elevate on the back of sacrificial murder.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so vulnerable, right? Is the fact that this brittle this brittle stage of human history, this brittle empire, is unable to do the thing that King Nebuchadnezzar here does, which is, if you even look at me with a questioning glance, even if you even ask me a question, nowadays we make fun of everyone. We make fun of Joe Biden. We make fun of Trump. We just, create cartoons of them. We do all sorts of things that were simply unimaginable back during the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, who said that, bro, forget about drawing cartoons of me. If you even look at me weird, I'm going to put your whole tribe to extinction. I'm going to execute your whole tribe, and I'm going to make a public mockery of your executed remains. Right? That's the common thread of all ancient empires, right? No, people might say, oh, the Romans were so sophisticated, or the Greeks were so sophisticated, they were so advanced, they were much more better learned than us, or whatever. But if you would rather live during this time, then you would live during that time, because back then, if you even questioned the empire's policy, you would end up dead. It's as simple as that. And nowadays you can get away with all sorts of things, and that's what makes this
Yeah, and
modern
all these
day.
people who are following like the Bronze Age pervert model of like pining for the
Right,
good old days where you
right.
could be working out 24/7 like
Or the
a
monarchists, the funny thing about the monarchists is, bro, if the king would straight away enter your home and pick up your sister or your wife, just because the king felt like it, and you wouldn't do a damn thing to stop it. That's
yeah.
what a monarchist looked like.
Yeah,
That's what.
but and the thing is, they all imagine that they would be the king doing it.
Yeah, the
But the problem is,
ideal,
but the problem
the
is,
good
let me
guy
settle
king.
down with
Yeah.
1 second. The problem is, anybody who would be a king would not be a guy who's hiding behind a pseudonym online to post their comments. Okay, like Bronze Age pervert, you have him come on Red Scare podcast, and he drops his accent and he's quivering with his voice, and he just sounds like a nerd on a message board all along. Well, guarantee you, buddy, you're not going to be the guy being the king, getting the first right to the bride. You're going to be at best a guy who would probably be sacrificially lynched in some kind of pharmacose ritual, thrown off like a hunchback over a cliff. You wouldn't have a place, buddy. I mean, it's not that they all LARP. That's why all the ones that talk a big game about Nietzschean, daydreaming. These are people who are, all of them to the T, cowardly. They don't ever put their name out, right? They can't put their name out because they're not men. They're not strong. They're weak. That's why they have to hide with voice, distort their voice, change their name, because they're cowards. They don't stand up incarnationally. They talk
fake
about
accents.
Yeah, they're just
adopt
like
fake.
Nietzsche, chewing on their tongue, and no one cares about them on message boards. That's what they do. But that's trendy when you can take, because it's a nice myth. You can spin a big narrative about how wonderful it is to be a king, and wouldn't it be cool to be a king and be Nebuchadnezzar and all this stuff. We know what happens to Nebuchadnezzar too. I mean, he's chewing on grass and stuff too, so he ends up in the same spot as Nietzsche, but chewing on stuff they shouldn't chew on. But I want to go back to this part here about the what the text says here. It says on verse 43, Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, and just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. Okay, so the people will be a mixture and they will not remain united. The surface level analysis of this would be that you've united so many different ethnic groups or whatever, right? A multicultural empire, which we are trying to do with this globalist empire. And that, there's going to be infighting and tribalism because we haven't created a united culture. That's one part of it. First of all, that only is possible a culture in which everybody is able to really keep their culture and celebrate it as such, and mock their home country. They didn't do that in Rome openly. Okay, they may have had different cultures, but they still had to defer to, well, you are the gods, you guys are the best guys. They had to pay tribute. In our culture today, the globalist culture, you are to mock the host countries that you're living in, like desecrate it, hate it. If you live in London and you're from another country, you mock it, you bash the flag, you bash their culture, you bash the way they look, you bash their teeth. You don't just, pay tribute. Oh yeah, they're great, but our great are too. You don't get to do that. It has to be, you hate on it. So that type of culture where there is a mixture in that way is only possible in a Christ-haunted society that defeats old concepts like nationalism as an ethnic boundary that can't be crossed and mixed. So that's the first thing. A universal culture requires a universal vision, which is brought in by Christianity, by Jesus. Second thing is the obvious one that we've been alluding to, sir, is that they're a mixture because they're not unanimous. They don't believe in the myth anymore because iron doesn't mix with clay. Brute force doesn't mix with the understanding of our humanity, of the revealed victim.
Right.
So the more you have humanism as the package by which you're selling people forced medications, garbage, trash, fake foods, lockdowns, all these terrible things that are brutalizing humanity. The more you try to sell iron with images of clay, it doesn't create unanimity because that clay part of it speaks to our humanity and it pricks us and it causes division, not unity.
Yeah, I mean, what keeps a tribe united? Uh, uh, Typically, it's the hatred of the other tribe, right? And it's uh, people probably wouldn't say hatred. That would be the more acceptable answer, I guess. But yeah, what really keeps them united is you know otherizing the other tribe, right? Like, that tribe, that other tribe is not human. They're not human beings. They're orcs, or they're like, or they're peasants or whatever,
Deplorables.
uh deplorables, exactly. So that's like, the ability to do that
They
keeps
call and they
a
call the
single
MAGA
tribe
people
united.
maggots now. Maggots, MAGA.
Right.
Yeah.
Maggots, and all sorts of weird stuff, anything that proves that they're not human. Maggots and all of that, right? They're not human. But when Jesus incarnates in the form of a man, right, in the form of a human being, then instantly we're forced to think that God values the human being, wherever that human being may be from, or whatever race or whatever gender that human being comes from. So Jesus's incarnation instantly short circuits that notion of that our tribal instincts, right? And it makes it possible for us, in modern times, in a culture that is saturated with the story of the gospel. It makes it possible for us to treat uh, diversity, multiculturalism, and all of that as virtuous, right? Because Jesus's message was, uh, love your neighbor as as I love you, and so on, right? His parable of the Good Samaritan says that the person who you see dying on the street, whatever race or whatever tribe that person is from, you are to treat that person as your neighbor, right? And
And
not treat that person
he picks a guy who's considered a dog and a
who's
heretic as the hero who
right.
helps his neighbor in that story.
Right, the
By his
Samaritan,
own by Jesus's
by
own
his own.
tribe, he picks out a character who would be a heretic and a blasphemer and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jesus makes it possible for us to have universalism, the universal, like it makes Jesus basically makes it possible for us to have a person of another tribe, another culture, another nationality, another
And
whatever race as your neighbor,
let's be clear
right?
here. If Jesus had not impacted this story, the calling of the true God, right, that Jesus reveals, Daniel's voice, you wouldn't have had a text where Daniel says, "Hey, that's a little bit harsh. Why don't you spare those people's lives?" Let's be clear here. This is very progressive. This is very radical for its time. If this was written by every other god that's ever been conceived of humans by humans, especially in this time period, given how far away it is from the incarnational presence of Christ, it wouldn't have been there would be no talk back about this is a little harsh. At least there wouldn't be any talk back that it was harsh recorded in the text. The text would say the king was afflicted by sorcerers and wizards who said they were speaking to gods, but in fact were enslaved to diabolical demons. And thus Nebuchadnezzar smote them and destroyed them by sending them off a cliff. And as they fell off the cliff, their bodies turned into dragon monsters as they bashed their heads into the rocks on the ground. That's the way this story would be written by every human being, including all these so-called Christians today who are still pining for this same stupidity of a king like Nebuchadnezzar. How foolish could they possibly be? It's insane to call yourself a Christian. It's like mixing clay with iron here. It just doesn't work. It doesn't,
Yeah.
because it's Christ's presence of the outsider that it allows us to even see this text in this wonky way where a commentary like, hey, that's a little harsh, is even brought into consideration. And again, this is the text. This is Daniel speaking about the treatment of people who are occupying him. He's an occupied, guy here, So this would be akin to, I don't know, who's this guy, Oliver Anthony, the guy that's the symbol of the outcast, forgotten man, right? Being brought up into the Davos crowd. And they say, Anthony, Oliver Anthony, we've got this problem here. A faction of the New World Order needs to be punished. They've been getting things wrong. Should we get rid of them? Should we torture them? And he's like, that's a little harsh. He's speaking out on defense of his own people who are occupying him, who are controlling, his life. So that's the radical nature here of this text.
Right.
He also was trying to be fair. He was also trying to defend. I guess it's his guild too. He was in the Sorcerer Guild. So let me add that practical element back in. He's in the Sorcerer Guild. He could have said, "Hey, kill all of them, but I'm the true guy." I mean, he could have gone for that pitch, but he didn't do that.
Well, he could have also gone in the very Marxist direction, right? Like that's the part thing about this text, is that it doesn't show that the sorcerers, like, it shows people as they are, right? It doesn't show that the sorcerer guild, sorcerers and all of these dream interpreters were being unjustly, molested or, persecuted or any of that. Because we do have a hint in the text that some of these people were scam artists. They were just looking out for their own sake. But here, like the Bible, that's the thing about the Bible, is that people want to take it into a certain Marxist like direction, where they say, like, oh, these people were unjust, so we can scapegoat the scapegoating class, right? We can oppress the oppressor, or we can do this shit, this reverse persecution on our rulers, and we can lynch them, as many people in modern times do. They want to overthrow the rulers, and they want to lynch the rulers, and guillotine them, so that we can feel justified in some sort of weird way. But the Bible says here, like, okay, these guys are not so. There are a lot of them are scam artists and so on. But Daniel still considers it worthwhile to defend these people, because the God of the Bible makes it possible for us to makes it possible for human beings to value each other, right? And that's why Daniel considers it worthwhile to come to the defense of his fellow guildsmen, the sorcerers, and save their lives, basically. So this is the Bible speaking to the defense of the human person, regardless of that human person's social status. It doesn't matter if the human person is poor or rich or whatever. If that human person is a human person, then that automatically makes it possible for us in modern times to have such a thing called innocence before presume innocence before guilt, right?
Which we're trying to, in our haste, we're trying to get rid of, and it's a stupid thing. And here's the final piece, which is going to tie back to my episode we did together on the cornerstone ritual, what I interpret that meaning to be, the cornerstone that Jesus talks about. In verse 44, Daniel chapter 2, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. So this is interesting because this ties back into what Jesus refers to himself as. Matthew chapter 21, verse 42, starting with, Jesus said to them, have you never read in the scripture, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. Therefore, I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and anyone on whom it falls will be crushed. And that's the stone in Daniel that pulverizes, breaks to pieces. It says a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces.
Yeah, everything came crashing down, right? After Jesus, the rock that
Yeah.
is Jesus, the stone the builders rejected, after it strikes at the feet, everything on top, right? The gold, the brass, and everything comes crashing down because we know every empire for what it is.
Yeah, now we can see things hidden since the foundation of the world. The world will know the scapegoat mechanism as the sausage making of all of these stupid empires, including in the past. And that's why the weak spot is the spot that we're in history, in which an empire is trying to imitate Christ as an antichrist by coming in the name of victims, coming in the name of the vulnerable, coming in the name as a victim ally, coming in the name of trying to save the planet, all these little cute things that are all dastardly, violent oligarch impositions of iron force. But when you mix it with when you try to mix it with Jesus' power of victim concern and love for the neighbor and love for the human, it will be vulnerable to Jesus' stone that will break them apart, not through force, little pagan Christians that want to be pagan still, but through the stone being rejected. So here's what it is, folks. In that, what makes the clay iron mixture brittle to the rock, first, they're not united around the scapegoats anymore. You know, whatever they do, COVID, whatever, it divides. It doesn't create unanimous. In Babylon's time, when they would write the myth about why the king killed those magicians and all their kids, nobody questioned it. It was unanimously received as just and right and good. Nowadays, you know, people are still going against the narrative of what they did to lock people down and force, you know, medicate people and stuff like that, the injuries, everything that we talk about with that. Now, same thing with the war. They can't sell that war to be unanimous. They just can't get us to believe the cartoon stupidity that all good people are on one side and they're sacrificing orcs and monsters on the other side. Just can't sell it. It just doesn't work because that clay is an imitation of the rock. And the rock is the cornerstone who's rejected. Every time they keep trying to double down with selling iron with clay, it makes it more schismatic, more divisive, and unable to govern, unable to keep it united and under the thumb of those who want to manage this global oligarchic empire. And what happens is the stone will continue to crush it to pieces. It will continue to reveal the victims, and the kingdom that's being built will never end. Because the kingdom is built on meekness. It's built on nonviolent social aikido, disrupting those who would use iron and clay to justify brutal sacrifice, which looks uglier and uglier the more closer in history we go. You know, the more into the future we go, Jesus is the king of the future. The closer history gets to the future, the more it gets crushed by the king. You know, that's the beauty of this. So the good news is that the more victim concern that globalists and all these folks use, the more it hastens Jesus's victory. That's the good news here that I promised we'd have. We'd have good news. This is gospel. Gospel means freedom.
Yes, absolutely. Jesus said the truth will set you free. Right. So yeah, he liberates us from that which has been keeping us enslaved to violence from the foundation of the world. And by revealing that enslavement, by revealing that coercive nature of humanity, Jesus lets the statue fall on itself by striking it at the feet and falling on itself. And this proves to
And
us
what's it striking? Striking our hearts.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's turning it all into rubble. It's striking our hearts. We're becoming more perfect. We're becoming
Yes.
more in the image of the true creator of the reality that we're in.
Yes, it's striking not just the iron and the clay, it's striking the iron, both the iron and the clay, right? So iron and the clay is striking the clay too. It's striking the heart of humanity. So it's striking each one of us individually so that we don't form into a collective, we don't unite into collective mobs and keep this tyrannical, oppressive, violent structure going. So that's why, as you mentioned, the little Caesars, the pagan types of Christians who want to use force and coercion, who want to say no, we should take the halls of power and we should have the monopoly over violence.
Yeah.
They're arguing that let's keep let's increase the iron part in the feet, right? They're not wanting the whole
No, they're not even doing that. They're trying to go back to silver or bronze age and make that fight it's just they don't get it. Because the whole point of the reason why it's a historical sequence that they're prophesying here is that you can't go back. You can't put on a golden sheen to the sacrificial violence, right? And they're trying to say, oh, look, we can get rid of this iron clay mixture, because they'll say, yeah, they're dastardly, corrupt oligarchs using clay, which is the victim concern to do their violence. And they'll say, well, let's just roll back to bronze and silver. But you can't do that because Jesus has set in motion a movement that's going on in history, and it's not static.
Right.
But one thing I have to say,
we can't undo what Jesus did. It's as simple as that.
But I want to say something too to that crowd. A lot of the folks who are the most vocal about having a monarch to fight a Christian monarch or something, right? Let me address that for a moment. They'll say, wouldn't it be great to have a Christian guy who's an authoritarian guy to correct all this? And I'd say, again, they don't understand what time it is. They don't understand what part of the statue we're at historically. They don't get it. You can't roll it back up the statue. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't say in that story. And then a great Christian monarch brought in a golden a sandal that stood on the shoe and protected everything again. It doesn't say that's stupidity, okay? It says that the stone that the builders rejected. So the rejection, in being rejected, you defeat the statue. It is in nonviolent, non-resistance where you use technology and mercy and grace and love and families and all the good stuff that we have to build. That means it takes action and it takes courage. That's what's going to incarnate the defeat of this empire. And so the good news is, when you see globalism and all this stuff, and it's doubling down on victim narratives to sell wickedness, don't use that as a sign to be, oh my goodness, I don't have time for positive future messages. We're going to lose for sure now. No, that's how you know we're about to win. And it's in the future, it's coming faster. And we just need to act like it, and that'll happen. Now, the second thing is, the other thing I want to say is there's a lot of folks who want these little monarch type authoritarian politics where they read the Italian fascists or whatever, and they think they understand real power. Okay, if that's what you want, your little Caesars, here's what I got to say. A lot of those folks, are not all of them, but a lot of the folks that lead that discourse online believe that saints are alive, right? And they pray to those saints every day. If you'd spend just as much time getting to know Jesus who's alive, you'd realize that you don't need a second king. He's actually alive. He's actually king. And he's actually going to kick some tail the way he did all through the Bible. Nonviolent, social Aikido, dismantling power structures by allowing their use of force to collapse on their own weight and revealing the hidden victims and opening up the possibility for humans to get together and create cities without bloodshed. That's the story, folks. So if you believe Jesus is king, it's not an abstraction. Spend just as much time as you do talking to saints who you think are alive. Spend that time talking to your king who's alive. He's not an abstraction. He's not an abstraction that you say, well, yeah, but he's reigning, but we still need an earthly king. Okay, then you apparently don't believe he's alive. You think he's dead or something because you act like it. If you're still begging for some kind of trad monarch to set things right and to ban all the creepy bad stuff by fiat, you don't believe that Jesus is alive, and you certainly don't believe he's your king. But if he's alive, and if he truly is king, as you say he is, then learn to take up your cross and follow him. Because God desires mercy, not sacrifice.
Yes, amen. And that term you used, social aikido, that's the key part, right? Uh, this is how Jesus defeated the greatest enemy of humanity, Satan. Is that he defeated Satan by dying on the cross for us, right? Dying on the cross at the hands of humanity. He didn't die. He didn't defeat Satan. Nowhere in the Bible does it say he defeats Satan by doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Sylvester Stallone on him on Satan by coming back, and literally, machine gunning Satan's minions. He doesn't do that. That's not how. Like even in tradition, we're not allowed to pray in by saying that God wipes out Satan through the use of violence, where we say he tramples down death by death, he tramples death, he defeats death by dying on the cross, right? And so that's the main part. Social aikido is allowing the enemy, allowing the overreach of empires to fall on itself, right? Fall on its own sword by just leaving the enemy to its own devices. In a world saturated by Christianity, the enemy cannot survive. Right?
I'm gonna go one step further. Any kind of God who would come back in history and wipe out all of his enemies the same way Nebuchadnezzar and Julius Caesar would is not Jesus. And it's not God. Because to do so would not be, would you know what? It irritates me a little bit here because it's so obvious, and it's amazing that we have to say this to all the church groups pretty much, but we'll say it. The fact that you would think that would be Jesus's completion of saving the world is such a missing of everything, because it means that humanity didn't even learn its lesson. It means that Jesus gives up and comes back and says, all right, I'm sacrificing billions of people who were on the bad guy team, and I'm going to institute my kingdom by force like every other pagan god and king ever did. It means he's rejecting everything about his earthly ministry. He's rejecting everything about the attack on violence in the prophetic tradition of the Old Testament. He's rejecting everything that, the best of his followers have ever done to change the hearts and minds of people by non-violently going to their death and then inspiring people to look to other things besides sacrifice and violence to achieve greatness, like technology and innovation. All the things that made our world get anywhere good, where we have the capacity to take care of widows and orphans with air conditioning and living like a better standard of living than kings have in the past. That all is built by the beautiful inspiration of Christ. And these folks who say that Jesus is going to come back like a bloodthirsty, savage barbarian, like every other god and every other freaking fake pagan, pansy fake god who's just a projection of a corpse somewhere on earth, is such a disgrace to Jesus. It's such a disrespect to Jesus and the beauty of his whole story of humanity, because that means he's basically giving up and saying, all right, you guys are God, I'm not. I'm coming back and I'm just going to start smashing everybody's brains in, because I tried to show you the nonviolent way and it failed. And even though it created all these technologies like air conditions and stuff and helping the poor and cures for diseases and like compassion for the disabled, we're not throwing them off cliffs in 2023. all that, it's just kind of a fluke. I failed. Let's go back to just smiting enemies and pulverizing people
let's
by
go back to
force.
plan B. Let's go back to plan B, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
So what did he do?
Yeah,
He didn't
I mean,
save the world. And then how? Here's the other thing. How could Christians say that they've achieved a status of heaven? How can you say that, if that's our final lesson is, well, we had to just smash everybody's brains in again, is that holiness? No, holiness means we have to make humanity whole, complete, universally, that every knee will bow, every tongue will profess that Christ is king, and that sacrificial violence has been holding us back from achieving greatness that we could have achieved such a long time ago, and we could have had harmony without murder, without minusing one person's life.
yes, he restores humanity, right? He doesn't destroy humanity. He restores humanity, and he makes humanity much more greater and much more beautiful than we could ever imagine. He makes it better than the Garden of Paradise in the book of Genesis, right?
Yeah.
He made in the book of Genesis, it was just a garden, but in the book of Revelation, it's a city, right? It's a huge fledgling city. It's a city of God. So what makes a garden grow into a city,
Yeah.
right? So that's
a good point. Yeah, that's a good point, because that goes against this whole thing that Jesus is going to come back and blow up everything, and it's that. Right. That would mean all we're left with after that is a garden, because we're starting with ground zero. But obviously it's not. It's obviously that he builds a city, and we're to be his body on earth, and he's really alive. And he's alive every time we, use our body, heart, soul, and mind to bear witness to the truth of him, which is that God desires mercy, not sacrifice. He says it over and over again. If you want to know the secret of everything I'm doing, it's this. And then everybody says, oh, the secret is that team is the Babylon. Oh God. What? Oh, the secret is if you join my team, then the real church will learn how to behave themselves and be really holy. Oh, what? What does that have to do with what? Oh, yeah, the secret is we just need to, have a king who's powerful, and he'll sacrificially murder people. But that's what God desires mercy, not sacrifice means. That's what that means, when he says, go and don't be like the pagans who lord over each other. Oh, the secret means he wants us to lord over each other. But just the good guys would do it, and that would make sense for when his first sermon, he leaves out the part where the day of judgment and wrath comes on their enemies, right? And that's why they get ticked off at him and try to kill him. Right, the first sermon he does. Yeah, that's the guy who means when he says, don't be like the Gentiles who lord over each other. That's the same guy who's ticking off his own audience all the time by inverting their in-group, out-group distinctions. That's the same guy. Yeah, he means that he just wants one of his in-group guys, one of his Christian guys down the road, to shove a cross into people by force. Like, that's what he means. I mean, how stupid. But again, that's what wisdom is about. It's revealing the stupidity of the world. This is stupid. The stupidity of Christians to read this stuff and to miss all of it. Because again, they've got their head up their own tails, and they're imitating the God that they want God to be, not who God really is. They want the God who gives them their little comfort zone. They want to feel like they got on the right team. And it's a much easier process to come up with some new purity code than it is to actually just imitate Jesus. Right. Jesus makes scarcity a non-issue when he feeds people. We can't do that. We're just telling you to be holy like our little tribe's rituals are. Oh, Jesus, is going out and he's solving problems. He's healing diseases. Well, we can't do that, but we can tell you our team has more purity points and holy points than the other team. It's all they can do. And that's why they missed the boat.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasn't a sage or a person who just went out into the wild and lived aloof from everyone. I think it's not a coincidence that Jesus was born into a profession of the tecton, where traditionally it's I don't know why this happened, but traditionally it's ascribed to being a carpenter. but it's more like a builder, right? An architecture, a construction planner, and all of that. It's a very sophisticated profession, right? So he's a constructor, and that's why the garden is transformed into the city, right? He Because you have the
all the
constructor entering.
all his people do is argue about who's the rock, right? With Peter on this rock,
Right,
and it's like, no, he's the artisan who knows how to be. He's the stonemason.
right,
And this idea of like, well, is it this guy or is it this thing, or who's in and who's out? That's all they do. That's all these
right.
churches do. Each group
Fighting for
like
the right.
fighting. Yeah, they're fighting for the right.
Who's going to sit at the right side of the
Yeah, I mean,
Lord.
that's a
But
prophecy. Yeah, for sure. That was actually, that's really good. That's actually a prophecy, because all those seats are held by people who think that they're the ones who get to sit at the good old boys, the good kids table. And we've gotten to a point which is so sad that all the best of these traditions are so terrified of the word universal and this word ecumenism is now, because they're so terrified that these weirdos who are building their iron clay mixtures of empire and banks and all this stuff have infected these traditions with these kind of fake versions of universal church. So they have all gone the opposite direction and said, let it not be. Let it not be that we would have a universal church vision. Let's just have our team. And that is a shame, right? That's a shame, because that's a sign that you don't have skin in the game. If you have skin in the game, you go to your neighbor, and that means you have to have a universal vision, because that's what Jesus has. Jesus didn't want a special boy team that would be hidden and nobody would understand it and have any way to really connect with it or relate to it unless they buy the special boy status of it all. Does that make sense? That's the problem that I have with a lot of the traditional groups that are getting an uptick in people's interest. Because I got a lot of problems with rock and roll Christianity. We can talk about that all day, but it's easy. But, one of the things that I have a concern about is that people moving to these more traditional groups, if you're moving there because you want the special boy status of that group, then you're idolizing the group instead of just coming there because you love Jesus and you want to be like him. If you love Jesus and you want to be like him, you won't be crying out for a Caesar. You won't be acting like it's the end of the world and there's nothing we can do to achieve greatness. You won't be acting like people who are hiding their light and not being bold and courageous and engaging with the culture. You won't be like a person who would say there is no ability to cure cancer and diabetes. No, you would go with every fiber in your being and contend for the faith as warriors are called to be. You would go and help the prisoner. That's the litmus test at the end of the age between the sheep and the goats. Those are the ones who go to the people who are doing the right thing, are the ones who are actually imitating Jesus, are going to the poor. How do you go to the poor if you can't help them get free from this diabolical oligarchy that enslaving people to debt? If all you can do is hide on a mountain and pray, how are you going to the poor? If you don't help the poor understand the power of fiat currency enslaving them and give them a path out with energy too cheap to meter? How can you go for the prisoner if you're going to live in a false dialectic in which we're enslaving each other by putting each other in prisons and all this stupidity, I'm going to get you and put you in prison one day, you wait, or you got high, I'm going to put you away for decades and your child will be fatherless? What kind of Christian is that? Shame on that trash. That's trash. It's not Christianity. That's trashy behavior. How can you help the prisoner if you can't even figure out how to get prisons obsolete? The future will have no prisons. The future of this earth will have no credit. It will have no debt. So let's live it out now. The future will not require human beings to be in debt to own a home that is decent and stably designed. The future will have food that's affordable for families that won't make you sick with diabolical diseases in order to feed your family. That's the future of this earth, this planet Earth. That is the future. So it's up to you whether you get on board with that or not.
Yes. Amen. Preach.
So we can look at all these things like Donald Trump and stuff, and people can tell me I'm too nice to Trump, I love Trump, I hate Trump, whatever you think about me, you're missing the point. These are all signs. We look at these stories, not signs like a decoder ring or a Bible code. We're not doing stupid things like that. I'm saying these are signs. They reveal the story of Christ unfolding in the headlines today. They give us types and signs and metaphors for what's happening. But we can be a part of this beautiful future of this city. Or we can continue to say that we found our special boy team and do nothing. Then you're part of the problem. And that's not surprising, is it? Because when Jesus showed up in history, who was his number one foe? Religious people who thought they were on a special boy team.
Right. He said them like you speak of the prophets, you say you follow the prophets, but the prophets wrote about me. Right? Jesus said that. They wrote about me. Like you guys are running away from me and after something else entirely, and you're arguing about this and that and this letter of the law and that.
Same thing they're doing today, 2,000 years later.
Right. Same thing they're doing today. They forgot all about Jesus. They forget all about Jesus.
He said, you would do greater things than me. That didn't mean fighting about who's got the special keys to the kingdom 2,000 years after he gave us the keys to the car. How stupid. How stupid is your Christianity? All these people who've made their careers saying that all day. My team has the keys to the kingdom. I don't know what kingdom that is. It's not the keys to the car that we're going in. Where we're going, there are no roads. So the keys to this kingdom, we're not playing on that game anymore, man. That's some backwards 2,000-year-old antiquated garbage, man. So whatever your little tradition is, there's a reason why I don't get into what tradition I'm in, but whatever your little tradition is, if it's leavened with that spirit, it's not of Christ, okay? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry. And you're in the loser's team. It goes nowhere. You know? You might figure out how to meditate next to a rock, but you're not going to learn how to be like Christ. You know? It's just not happening. And I'm not saying that to judge anybody, but I see the spirit of so much of this religiosity as a kind of reaction to this, powerful globalist ecumenism or whatever this stuff is, victimism, wokeism, and they're just cowering in their, quaking in their boots, running to their little special boy library. We don't have time for that.
Amen.
I'm David Gornoski. This is Surit Dasgupta. Go to aneighborschoice.com for more of this content and email us hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.